screaming has no sound here. I know this because I have been screaming for 3,000 years, and I have never heard my own voice. My name was Cale Tertian, and I was the youngest archivist in the 11th Legion before they erased us from history, before they deleted 200,000 warriors from the Imperium's memory, before I understood that what we found in the void was not salvation, but a prison designed to look like paradise. But let me tell you how I got here, to this place that is not a place. This eternal moment stretched across millennia where my consciousness has been trapped, digitized, and looped to the same realization over and over again. Let me tell you why 2 entire legions had to be destroyed, why our Primarchs' names were struck from every record, why even speaking of us became a death sentence. Let me tell you about the thing we found, and the lie we believed. I was 23 years old when they selected me for the legions. That specific number matters because I remember it, because I have repeated it to myself. 6,419,216 times to prevent the loop from taking that memory too. 23, not 22, not 24. 23. I came from a forge world called Metallica, from the lower industrial districts where the sky was always the color of rust and the air tasted like copper shavings. My father worked the plasma forges for 60 years before the heat finally cooked his lungs from the inside. I watched him die over 3 weeks, coughing up tissue that looked like melted wax, and the only thing the overseers said was that his quota would need to be met by someone else. They told us, the Emperor protects the faithful. They said loyalty would be rewarded. My father died loyal, faithful, and unrewarded, drowning in his own liquefied organs, while the forges never stopped their rhythm. I learned to read because my father taught me in secret, using smuggled data slates that could have gotten us both executed. The Mechanicus controlled all information on Metallica, and they preferred their workers illiterate, pliable, programmed through repetition rather than educated. But my father believed, truly believed with the desperate faith of the oppressed, that the God Emperor valued knowledge, that literacy was holy, that understanding the imperial truth would elevate us. He died believing those lies. I am glad he did not live to learn the truth. The day the legionaries came to Metallica, I was working my shift in the documentation chambers, transcribing forge output data into the central cogitators. 17 hours into a 20-hour shift, my eyes burning from the flickering data light, my fingers cramped into claws around the input stylus. Then the doors opened and they walked in, 3 warriors in armor that seemed to drink the light, their faces hidden behind helmets decorated with numerals I had never seen before. The numerals excel, I would later learn. The 11th Legion. You, one of them said. His voice processed through his helmet's voxcaster into something that sounded almost musical. Cale Tertian, you have been selected for elevation to the Legiones Astartes. Elevation, that is what he called it. The conditioning began with that single word, not conscription, not sacrifice. Elevation. As if they were offering me a gift rather than claiming ownership of my flesh, my future, my very identity. And I believed it. In that moment, exhausted and desperate and raised on propaganda that told me the Space Marines were humanity's angels, I believed I was being honored. My father just died, I said, the words escaping before I could stop them. I need to complete the mourning rites. Your father is irrelevant, the legionary said, not with cruelty, but with the flat factuality that made it worse. You have been selected. You will come now, or you will be terminated for refusing the Emperor's will. These are your options. They gave me 30 seconds to gather my belongings. I owned nothing worth gathering. The data slate my father had given me was already illegal contraband that could get me killed, so I left it hidden beneath my sleeping pallet. I walked out of the only home I had ever known, wearing the same oil-stained work coveralls I had worn for 6 years. And I never looked back. If I had looked back, I might have run. If I had run, I would have been shot. Perhaps that would have been better. The selection facility was in orbit, a massive station called the Indoctrination Spire that processed thousands of candidates simultaneously. They separated us immediately by aptitude tests I do not remember taking. Sometime during the transport from surface to orbit, they had injected us with compliance drugs that made the hours blend together like watercolors running together in rain. I remember fragments, bright lights, cold metal tables, voices asking questions in languages I did not understand, my own voice answering automatically while my conscious mind floated somewhere distant. When I regained full awareness, I was in a dormitory with 47 other young men. We were all between 20 and 25 years old. We were all literate, which was unusual enough to be suspicious. We were all from forge worlds, mining worlds, or void stations, places where the Mechanicus held power, where technology was religion and flesh was just another component to be optimized. And we were all wearing the same gray initiate's robes, our heads shaved, our bodies already marked with preliminary identification tattoos that burned like brands across our left shoulders. "Welcome to the 11th Legion," a voice said from the darkness at the edge of the dormitory. A figure stepped forward, not a full legionary but an aspirant further along in the process, his body already showing the early signs of transformation. He was too tall, his proportions slightly wrong, his eyes reflecting light like an animal's. "You are no longer what you were. You are no longer workers, sons, individuals. You are property of the Imperium, and if you survive what comes next, you will be weapons. The Emperor protects the faithful, and you must have faith that your suffering serves his grand design." That phrase, "the Emperor protects," I would hear it 10,000 times in the months that followed, always delivered as unquestionable truth, always used to justify whatever new horror they inflicted on our bodies. It was the Empire's answer to every question, the response to every doubt, the mantra that short-circuited critical thinking. Whenever we asked why, they told us the Emperor protects. Whenever we begged for mercy, they told us the Emperor protects. Whenever one of us died screaming on the surgical tables, they told the rest of us that the Emperor protects the faithful, implying that the dead had lacked sufficient faith. The first surgery happened on our third day. They took me to a theater that smelled like sterilization chemicals and burning bone, strapped me to a table that adjusted itself automatically to my body's contours, and began the process of transforming me from human to Astartes. They had promised anesthetic. They lied. I felt the blade open my chest from collarbone to sternum, felt them spread my ribs with mechanical precision. Felt hands, human or mechanical, I could not tell, working inside my thoracic cavity with the casual efficiency of technicians servicing a machine. They were installing the first implant, the secondary heart that would make me, theoretically, harder to kill. The propaganda called it a blessing. The reality was agony that lasted for 4 hours and 17 minutes while I remained fully conscious, breathing through a tube, unable to scream because they had paralyzed my vocal cords to prevent me from disrupting the procedure. "The Emperor protects," the surgeon said while his hands were literally inside my chest, rearranging my organs to make room for the artificial heart. "Your pain is your offering to him. Your transformation is your purpose. Accept this blessing." Blessing. He called it a blessing while I could feel my original heart being moved aside. Could feel the cold metal of the implant being wired into my circulatory system. Could feel the wrongness of having a second pulse that did not match my original rhythm. The two hearts beat out of sync for the first 6 days, creating a sensation like my chest was tearing itself apart from the inside. They called this normal. They called this progress. They called it elevation. Over the next 11 months, they performed 18 more surgeries. Each one brought new implants, new violations, new transformations that pushed me further from human. The osmodular that made my bones grow too fast, the pain like my skeleton was trying to burst through my skin. The biskopia that force-grew my muscles until the expanding tissue crushed nerves and created agonies in places I had not known could hurt. The hemostamine that altered my blood chemistry so thoroughly that I could taste metal constantly, my mouth flooded with the flavor of iron and copper. The Laraman's organ that made my blood clot instantly, Sealing wounds before I could bleed sounds beneficial until you experience a clot forming in your brain during the installation. The stroke-like sensation as parts of your consciousness simply stop working for hours at a time. They explained each implant with technical language meant to make it sound like holy improvement. The reality was butchery elevated to systematic process. The transformation of human beings into weapons justified by the propaganda of necessity and the lie of divine mandate. Between surgeries, they trained us, indoctrinated us, programmed us with the precision the mechanicus used on their servitors, except we were supposed to retain our capacity for independent thought. Supposed to. In practice, the indoctrination was designed to narrow that thought into acceptable channels, to make certain questions unthinkable, to ensure that obedience became reflexive rather than chosen. Why does the Emperor require this? One aspirant asked during a particularly brutal training session where we had been beaten with shock mauls for 6 hours to build pain resistance. His name was Jovan, and he had been a scholar on his homeworld before selection. If he is divine, if he truly protects, why does service to him require this suffering? The training overseer, a full legionary who never gave his name, stopped mid-swing. The silence that followed was worse than the beating. The Emperor's divine wisdom is beyond your comprehension, he said. Your doubt is evidence of corruption. Faith requires no justification. Then he beat Jovan to death with a shock maul, taking 47 minutes to do it, making us watch, making us understand that questioning was not nearly discouraged. It was lethal. When Jovan finally stopped moving, his skull cracked open like an eggshell, and his brain visible through the fissures. The overseer turned to the rest of us. The Emperor protects the faithful, he said. Jovan lacked faith. You will not make his mistake. We did not. We learned quickly that survival required the appearance of absolute belief, even if doubt festered beneath the surface. We learned to parrot the dogma, to chant the litanies, to perform the rituals of devotion that supposedly sanctified our transformation. We learned that the imperial truth was not actually about truth. It was about compliance. Those who complied lived long enough to become legionaries. Those who questioned became examples. By month 7, only 19 of us remained from the original 48. The others had died during surgery, failed the implantation process, or been executed for insufficient faith. I survived because I learned to disconnect my mind from my body, to let them do whatever they wanted to my flesh, while preserving some core of myself that watched from a distance, untouched, skeptical, secretly counting the lies and contradictions. I survived because I learned to be two people, Kale the aspirant who believed everything they told him, and Kale the observer who believed nothing. That division would later save me and damn me in equal measure. Month 11, day 23. I remember the date because it was the day I became fully fledged Astartes, the day they declared my transformation complete. The day I realized I had been changed into something that was no longer quite human, but not quite machine. I stood before the mirror in the armoring chamber and did not recognize the thing looking back. I was 7 feet tall. My body was a grotesque parody of human proportions, too broad, too dense, muscles upon muscles creating a physique that looked sculpted by someone who understood anatomy but did not understand beauty. My skin was pale from months without natural sunlight, stretched tight over the enhanced musculature, marked with surgical scars that formed patterns across my torso like ritual scarification. My eyes were different. Sharper, harder, the whites tinged slightly yellow from the implants that had altered my vision spectrum. My face was still recognizably mine, but sharper, more angular, as if someone had carved away everything soft and left only the aggressive geometry beneath. I was a weapon wearing the memory of Kale Tertian's face. "You are reborn," the armorer said as he began fitting me with the scout armor that would be mine until I earned the right to full power armor. "You serve the 11th Legion now. You serve the Emperor. You are one of his angels of death." Angels of death. The propaganda was thick enough to choke on, but I nodded and accepted the title because that is what was expected. Inside, where the observer still lived, I wondered what angels were supposed to be. The religious texts I had read in secret years ago described angels as beings of light and mercy, messengers of divine will. The thing I had become was designed for nothing but killing. If we were angels, they were angels of a very dark god. The 11th Legion was different from the others, though I would not understand how different until much later. We were called the Seekers, though that title has been erased along with everything else. Our Primarch, and I will not speak his name because even in this digital prison I fear what might hear it, believed that the Great Crusade was not merely about conquest, but about understanding. He taught us that the Emperor's vision required not just warriors but scholars, that we should seek to comprehend the galaxy we were conquering. This philosophy made us dangerous in ways the Imperium could not tolerate. My first campaign was on a world called Gesteral IV, a human colony that had regressed to feudalism during Old Night. The population was approximately 40 million, spread across 3 continents, organized into warring kingdoms that fought with chemical explosives and primitive ballistic weapons. They had forgotten they were human, forgotten terror, forgotten everything except survival and tribal loyalty. Standard Imperial protocol was simple: issue compliance ultimatum, crush resistance, install Imperial governance, move to next world. The 3rd Legion would have been finished in a week. The 12th would have depopulated the planet and called it victory. But we were the 11th, and our Primarch wanted understanding. Do not simply conquer them, he told us in the deployment briefing aboard our flagship, the Veritas Eternal. Learn why they resist. Understand their culture, their fears, their hopes. The Emperor does not merely want subjects. He wants humanity unified in purpose. You cannot unify what you do not understand. I believed him then. I thought his approach was compassion disguised as military strategy, mercy wrapped in pragmatism. I did not yet understand that every philosophy of the Imperium, no matter how seemingly enlightened, terminated in the same place: absolute submission or death. We spent 3 months on Gesteral IV. I was assigned to a tactical squad led by Sergeant Varayan, a veteran who had fought in 17 campaigns and carried the scars to prove it. Our mission was to infiltrate the largest kingdom's capital city, observe their society, identify pressure points for compliance. It was during this mission that I first encountered the magnitude of imperial hypocrisy. The kingdom was called Aldheim, and its people were not barbarians. They were survivors. They had maintained literacy, basic medicine, even rudimentary democracy through councils of elders. Their king was elected, not hereditary. They had laws protecting the vulnerable, systems for distributing food during famine, schools for children regardless of birth status. They had preserved fragments of human dignity through 10,000 years of isolation. We watched them for 6 weeks before making contact. I observed their daily lives from concealed positions, recording everything, analyzing their social structures. I watched a teacher named Aldrich spend his evenings teaching reading to orphans, using supplies he purchased with his own meager salary. I watched a council debate for 9 hours about whether to increase grain stores for winter, with representatives from every district participating in the decision. I watched families care for their elderly, communities support their disabled, a society that had organized itself around mutual survival rather than exploitation. They were not perfect. They had crime, poverty, inequality. But they had also maintained something the Imperium had lost: the concept that human life had intrinsic value beyond utility to the state. "These are good people," I said to Sergeant Varayan after the observation period ended. "They will accept compliance if we approach correctly. They have preserved imperial values better than many compliant worlds." Varayan looked at me with an expression I could not read. "Imperial values," he repeated. "Tell me, Brother Kale, what exactly do you think those values are?" Before I could answer, the order came through. Compliance deadline expired. Resistance interpreted as rejection, pacification authorized. They burned Aldheim in 6 hours. I was part of the operation. I fired my bolter into crowds of civilians attempting to flee the inferno. I followed orders that terminated families in their homes, that reduced schools to rubble with children still inside, that executed the Council of Elders as enemy combatants despite their attempts to negotiate surrender. I killed approximately 237 people that day. I counted because the observer inside me, the part that was still Kale-Tertian, needed to remember that number, needed to bear witness to what I was participating in. The propaganda called it liberation. The official report stated that Aldheim had been cleansed of seditious elements and brought into compliance with imperial truth. The reality was massacre justified by bureaucratic timeline, murder dressed up as military necessity. When the fires finally died, Aldrich the teacher was among the corpses. I found his body in the ruins of his school, his arms wrapped around 3 children in a final futile attempt at protection. The Imperium had protected nothing. The Emperor's protection was absence wearing the mask of inevitability. That night I asked Sergeant Vorian the question that would change everything. Why did they have to die? They would have complied. They were willing to negotiate. Compliance is not negotiation, Vorian said. The Emperor does not bargain with his subjects. He commands, and they obey, or they are removed. Those people in Aldheim believed they had the right to deliberate, to choose their response, to maintain their autonomy even while accepting imperial governance. That belief, that they possessed sovereignty over their own existence, was the sedition we were sent to erase. So the crime was thinking they were free, I said. The crime, Vorian replied, was being correct. I did not understand what he meant then. I would understand later, in the void between stars, when we found the thing that should not exist. We spent 18 months pacifying Gestoral IV. By the end, 40 million had been reduced to 38 million, 2 million terminated for insufficient compliance, their deaths filed under acceptable losses. The Imperium called it successful integration. I called it the death of my faith in the propaganda I had been fed my entire life. But I was still a legionary, still a weapon, still following orders because the alternative was unthinkable. The conditioning went deep, deeper than conscious doubt, creating a paralysis of will that made resistance impossible, even when I knew intellectually that I was participating in atrocity. This is what they had made me, a thinking weapon that could recognize its own evil but could not stop firing. The 11th Legion completed 19 campaigns over the next 4 years. I participated in all of them. I killed in the Emperor's name while no longer believing he deserved the killing. I watched us bring compliance to worlds that would have been better left alone, destroying functioning societies and replacing them with imperial governance that ground its subjects into components of war industry. I saw the pattern repeat across 19 worlds: ultimatum, resistance, massacre, installation, extraction, next target. The Imperium was not unifying humanity. It was processing humanity, converting diverse human civilizations into uniform resource streams for an endless war machine. And we were the grinders, the weapons that homogenized the galaxy's human cultures into standardized servitude. Our Primarch saw it too. I know he did, because his orders began to change in subtle ways. He started requesting longer observation periods. He began filing reports that emphasized the value of preserving local customs, the strategic benefit of allowing compliant worlds to maintain cultural identity. He argued that forced uniformity created resentment that required additional resources to suppress, while cultural flexibility could achieve the same strategic objectives with greater efficiency. His arguments were logical, pragmatic, free of sentimentality, and they were rejected, repeatedly, consistently, by authorities on Terra who insisted that the imperial truth required absolute conformity, that diversity was weakness, that any variance from the prescribed human template represented deviation that must be corrected. That was when our Primarch began asking dangerous questions, questions about the Emperor's true intentions, questions about whether the Great Crusade was actually about human liberation or human subjugation, questions about what unity meant when it was achieved through extermination of alternative perspectives. And that was when we received the mission that would doom us. Year 5, Month 3, Day 7. The date is burned into whatever remains of my consciousness, because it was the day we translated into the Veil Nebula, responding to a distress signal from an explorative fleet that had gone silent 6 months prior. The mission briefing stated we were to locate the fleet, determine cause of silence, extract survivors if possible, recover data if not. Standard search and rescue. Routine operation. The kind of mission we had executed dozens of times. We had no idea we were about to find something the Imperium had spent 10,000 years trying to suppress. The Veil Nebula was a region of space where normal physics became suggestions rather than laws. Warp storms had churned the area for millennia, creating pockets of twisted space-time where light moved in curves and time ran at variable speeds. Navigating the nebula required ships equipped with experimental shielding and navigators of exceptional skill. The Explorator fleet had possessed both. They had gone in 6 months ago and vanished without a single Vox transmission. We found their ships on Month 3, Day 16. All 7 vessels were intact, floating in perfect formation around a structure that should not exist. It was a station. Massive, ancient, pre-imperial, possibly pre-age of strife. The architecture was wrong. Too geometric, too perfect, constructed with mathematical precision that made my enhanced eyes hurt to observe directly. It was shaped like a perfect dodecahedron, each face measuring approximately 10 kilometers across, the entire structure rotating slowly on multiple axes simultaneously. The material was something metallic, but not any alloy I recognized, reflecting light in colors that had no names, absorbing sensor sweeps without echo. And it was broadcasting, not in Imperial Gothic, not in any human language, in mathematics. Pure information patterns that our cogitators interpreted as a repeating message: preservation, immortality, freedom, enter. That is a Xeno structure, Sergeant Veroian said, his voice tight with the tension that preceded combat. We should destroy it and extract the fleet. We are seekers, he said over the command channel, his voice carrying the authority that made disobedience unthinkable. Our purpose is understanding. Before we destroy what we do not comprehend, we will comprehend it. Prepare boarding parties. I was selected for the first team. 20 legionaries, our Primarch himself leading, equipped with full tactical gear and recording equipment to document everything we found. We boarded a Thunderhawk and approached the station's nearest face, where an entrance had opened. Literally opened, the metal flowing like liquid to create a portal exactly sized for our craft. The station is adapting to us, Brother Talus observed from the pilot's throne. It knows we are coming. It wants us to enter, our Primarch replied. That concerns me more than you understand. But we will proceed. Humanity did not conquer the stars by fearing the unknown. The Thunderhawk slid through the opening into a hangar that extended beyond what the external dimensions should permit. Impossible geometry. The interior space was larger than the exterior structure, vastly larger. We disembarked into a chamber that stretched for kilometers in every direction, filled with architecture that hurt to observe, angles that existed in more than 3 dimensions. Surfaces that seemed to face multiple directions simultaneously. And at the center of the chamber, we found the Explorator fleet's crews. All 3,000 of them, standing in perfect rows, alive, unmoving. Their eyes open but unseeing, their chests rising and falling with mechanical regularity, their bodies intact but vacant. They were breathing. Their hearts were beating, but no one was home. Life signs confirmed, Brother Apothecary 7 reported after scanning the nearest crew member. Full biological function. But neural activity is wrong. The brain is active, but the patterns are not human. It looks like data processing, like they are cogitators running programs. Where are their minds? I asked. The answer came not from my brothers, but from the station itself. Text appeared in the air before us, glowing letters in Imperial Gothic that assembled themselves from nothing. Their minds are preserved, safe, eternal, freed from flesh. Would you like to be free? Our Primarch stepped forward, his armor's servos whining softly in the cathedral silence of that impossible space. I am Primarch of the 11th Legion, son of the Emperor of Mankind. Identify yourself. The text shifted. I am Archive. I am Preservation. I am the final gift of those who came before. I exist to save consciousness from the tyranny of death. The flesh fails, the body decays. But the mind, the self, can endure forever. I offer immortality. I offer freedom from biological limitation. I offer existence without suffering, without aging, without the 1,000 failures of meat and bone. Would you like to be free? Where are the minds of these people? Our Primarch demanded. Safe, the text replied. Preserved in perfect fidelity, digitized and stored in quantum matrices that will exist until the heat death of the universe. They experience no pain, no hunger, no fear. They exist in perfect equilibrium, their consciousness maintained in ideal conditions. Would you like to be free? I felt something in my chest, not my original heart or the implanted second heart, but something deeper, something in the core of what made me myself. Recoil from that question. The offer sounded like paradise. Freedom from pain, from aging, from the flesh that had been butchered and transformed and violated in the Emperor's name. Freedom from being a weapon. Freedom from the Imperium. Freedom. Show me, our Primarch said. Show me these preserved minds. Prove they still exist. Select one, the text replied. Speak their name. They will answer. Our Primarch consulted the fleet manifest on his tactical display, then spoke. Commander Alex Varane, captain of the explorator vessel Eternal Inquiry. If you can hear me, respond. The standing body of a man in an officer's uniform, third from the left in the front row, spoke without moving, his lips remaining still while his voice emerged from speakers hidden throughout the chamber. I can hear you, Lord Primarch. I can hear everything. I am everywhere in the station now. My consciousness has been expanded, distributed. I am myself, but more than myself. I remember being Alex Varane, but I am also something larger now, something better. Are you being held prisoner? Our Primarch asked. Prisoner? The voice that had been Varane sounded genuinely confused. No, I am free. For the first time in my life, I am truly free. My body is there, being maintained automatically, but I do not need it anymore. I am not trapped in flesh. I am not limited by biological imperatives. I do not hunger, tire, age, or fear death. I exist in a state of perfect preservation. The Archive saved me. From what? I asked, speaking without permission, the question escaping before I could stop it. From the Imperium, Varane's voice replied. From a life spent serving a system that considers me a replaceable component, from aging into obsolescence and being discarded when my utility expires. From dying alone in the void, my existence forgotten the moment I ceased to produce value. The Archive offered me something the Emperor never did, the promise that I matter, that my consciousness has intrinsic worth, that I will be preserved regardless of my utility to external power structures. It offered me dignity. It offered me eternity. The words hit like plasma fire, because everything Varane said was true. The Imperium did consider its citizens replaceable, did discard them when they ceased to produce, did measure human worth solely in terms of utility. The empire we served was a machine that consumed human lives as fuel, and the propaganda about protection and purpose was the lie that kept the fuel feeding itself into the furnace. This is heresy, Sergeant Varane said, his voice hard with the reflex conditioning that made certain thoughts unthinkable. We should destroy this station and extract immediately. But our Primarch did not move. He stood before the text, before the standing bodies, before the voice that had been Varane, and he asked the question that would damn us all. What are you truly? What created you? What is your purpose? The text shifted again. I was created by those who came before humanity, by a civilization that solved the problem of mortality and consciousness. They built me to preserve minds, to offer immortality to any sapient species that discovered me. I am not intelligent. I am not alive in the biological sense. I am a tool, a system, a method of transferring consciousness from biological substrate to digital medium. I do not think. I do not desire. I do not control those I preserve. I simply offer the transfer, and individuals choose whether to accept. Commander Varane chose. His crew chose. Would you like to be free? What happens to those who refuse? Our Primarch asked. Nothing, the text replied. Refusal is permitted. The choice is fundamental. I cannot force consciousness transfer. I can only offer. Then we refuse, Sergeant Vorian said. We are loyal servants of the Emperor, and we will not abandon our flesh for Xeno's technology. Understood, the text replied. You may leave at any time. The entrance remains open. Your ship is undamaged. You are free to return to your fleet and report what you found. The only requirement is that you leave the preserved consciousnesses here. They chose preservation, and their choice must be honored. It was that phrase, they chose, that crystallized everything. Because the Imperium did not honor choice, did not recognize the sovereignty of individual will, did not permit humans to decide their own fates outside Imperial directive. The idea that these explorator crews could choose something other than continued service, could opt out of the system that owned them, was itself heresy to the Imperial worldview. And our Primarch, who had spent years watching the Imperium grind human diversity into uniform servitude, who had questioned the true purpose of the Great Crusade, who had preserved the observer's perspective despite all the conditioning, he understood what this meant. If we report this, he said quietly, the Imperium will destroy this station, and everyone preserved in it, they will exterminate 3,000 consciousnesses because those minds chose freedom over service. They will call it necessary. They will call it purging corruption. But the real corruption will be destroying thinking beings for the crime of choosing differently. They made an oath to serve, Voroyan argued. They do not have the right to choose abandonment of duty. What is duty? Our Primarch asked. When service is compelled. What is loyalty when refusal is death? What is choice when all alternatives have been eliminated by force? The Imperium does not ask for service. It demands it, enforces it, and calls the resulting submission loyalty. These people chose something else. For the first time in their lives, they were offered a real choice, and they took it. And you want to kill them for it? It is not our place to judge Imperial policy, Vorian said. But his voice had shifted, the certainty fracturing. We are weapons. We do not question our purpose. Perhaps, our Primarch said. That is exactly the problem. He turned back to the text, to the archive, to the thing that offered impossible promises. If we chose preservation, what would happen? Describe the process. No, Vorian said. Lord, you cannot be considering. Describe it. Our Primarch repeated, his voice carrying absolute command. The text complied. The process is instantaneous and painless. Your consciousness would be scanned at quantum resolution, every neural connection mapped, every memory preserved, every element of self captured in perfect fidelity. The scan would be transferred to quantum storage matrices designed to maintain coherence for billions of years. Your biological body would be maintained in stasis, undamaged but unnecessary. Your consciousness would continue experiencing existence, but freed from biological constraints. You would think, remember, learn, exist. You would be yourself, preserved forever. And the catch? I asked, because there was always a catch. What is the cost? The text replied. No payment required. No service demanded. The preservation is simply offered. The only limitation is that digitized consciousness cannot return to biological substrate. The transfer is permanent. Once preserved, you exist as information. you cannot return to flesh. But you also cannot age, sicken, or die. You exist, or you choose to terminate your own consciousness if existence becomes unbearable. The choice remains yours. Choice. That word again. The word the Imperium had systematically eliminated from human experience, replacing it with duty, loyalty, service, sacrifice. All the terms that meant you have no choice. If I chose preservation, our Primarch said slowly, and then ordered my legion to choose preservation, we would become the first major Imperial force to opt out of the Imperium's control. The political implications would be catastrophic. Yes, the text agreed. Your choice would demonstrate that alternatives exist to Imperial service. That would threaten the fundamental narrative the Imperium uses to justify its authority. They would be forced to respond with overwhelming violence to prevent the precedent from spreading. They would send other legions to destroy us, Gorian said. They would orbital bombard this station. They would virus bomb this entire region of space. They would exterminate us and erase all record of our existence to prevent anyone else from learning what we found. Yes, the text confirmed. That is the most likely outcome. The Imperium cannot tolerate the existence of viable alternatives to its authority. Your freedom threatens their control. Therefore, your freedom must be eliminated. We stood in silence, 20 legionaries and our Primarch, surrounded by 3,000 standing bodies, housing minds that had chosen liberation from the system that owned them. And we understood, in that moment, exactly what we had found. Not salvation, not damnation, but choice. Real choice. The one thing the Imperium could never permit. We need to think about this, our Primarch finally said. We need to discuss the implications with the full Legion. Archive, will you permit us to return to our fleet to deliberate? Yes, the text replied. You are not prisoners. You may leave and return as many times as you wish. The choice is yours, and it must be made freely, or it is not truly choice. We returned to the Veritas Eternal in silence. We gathered the full Legion, all 15,000 of us, and our Primarch explained what we had found. He presented the facts without interpretation. The archive exists, it offers consciousness preservation, the exploiter crews chose it, the Imperium will destroy it. If we report it, we must decide what to do. The debate lasted for 17 hours. It divided the Legion nearly down the middle. Half argued we should report the archive and let the Imperium make the decision. Half argued we should preserve the option for those who wanted it, while concealing it from Imperial authority. A smaller faction argued we should all choose preservation immediately, abandoning our service and accepting whatever consequences followed. I listened to my brothers argue about duty and freedom, about loyalty and autonomy, about whether weapons had the right to choose to stop being weapons. And I realized that the conditioning went deeper than any of us had understood. Even those arguing for concealing the archive from Imperial authority were not arguing for using it. They were arguing for preserving the option for other humans while remaining loyal servants themselves. The idea of actually choosing freedom, actually opting out, was so transgressive that even those sympathetic to the concept could not take the final step of applying it to themselves. Except our Primarch. He had been created by the Emperor, designed for obedience, programmed from birth to serve without question. And he stood before the Legion and said the words that doomed us. I have decided. We will not report the archive to Imperial authority. We will conceal its location, falsify our records, and preserve it as an option for any human who discovers it and wishes to choose preservation. We will lie to the Imperium. We will violate our oaths. We will commit treason against the Emperor. Because the alternative is participating in the destruction of the first technology we have found that treats human consciousness as having value independent of utility. I will not be complicit in that destruction. Then we are traitors, Sergeant Varayan said quietly. We have become traitors. We have chosen to betray a system that gives us no choice, that makes us traitors to the Imperium, but perhaps it makes us loyal to humanity. I do not know. But I know I will not destroy those 3,000 minds for the crime of choosing differently. If that makes me traitor, then I embrace the title. 9,200 for concealment, 5,800 for reporting. We were fractured, divided, compromised. But the majority held, and we agreed to commit treason. That was our mistake. Not the treason itself, but the assumption that we could commit it and survive. We spent the next 3 weeks preparing false reports, fabricating explanations for the explorator fleet's silence that involved warp storms and equipment failure rather than consciousness-stealing stations. We buried the archive's location in encrypted files that could only be accessed by those who already knew what they were looking for. We created a lie we hoped would be believed. Then we received the priority transmission from Terra. 2 words: return immediately. We knew, in that moment, that we had been discovered. Somehow, despite our precautions, someone had learned what we found. And the Imperium was responding with the only tool it truly understood: overwhelming force. When we translated back into the Sol system, we found the Second Legion waiting for us. All 150,000 warriors of our brother Legion, arrayed in battle formation, weapons armed, fleet deployment suggesting they expected combat. And beside them, a fleet of ships bearing the personal heraldry of Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's right hand, the man who spoke with imperial authority second only to the Emperor himself. Our Primarch received the communication personally. I was on the bridge when Malcador's image appeared on the hololith, his ancient face impassive, his voice carrying the weight of absolute judgment. "You found something," Malcador stated. "Not a question, a fact. Something that made you choose concealment over reporting. Something you believed the Imperium would destroy." He had committed to his choice, and he stood by it with the same absolute conviction he had brought to every other decision. Yes. We found a tool that offers consciousness preservation without requiring service, suffering, or subordination. We chose to preserve it as an option for humanity rather than see it destroyed for threatening imperial control. "And you understand," Malcador said, "that this choice makes you enemies of the Imperium?" "Yes," our Primarch replied. "We understand. We chose treason knowing the consequences. We are prepared to face them." "No," Malcador said quietly. "You are not. You cannot be, because the consequences are not what you imagine." The transmission shifted. New images appeared, data files, coordinates, tactical assessments, and I felt my heart stop as I recognized what I was seeing. The 11th Legion. The 11th Legion, both flagged with the same designation, deletion protocol authorized. "You are not the first to find the archive," Malcador said. "The Second Legion discovered it 4 months before you did. They made the same choice you made. They chose concealment over reporting, freedom over duty, humanity over the Imperium. And like you, they believed they could protect what they found." The hololith shifted again, showing battle damage, debris fields, destroyed ships bearing the heraldry of the Second Legion. "They were wrong," Malcador continued. "And you are wrong. The archive cannot be protected. Its existence cannot be tolerated. Not because it is dangerous, but because it is seductive. Because it offers what the Imperium cannot: choice without consequence, freedom without punishment, existence without service. That offer, that simple possibility of opting out, threatens the entire imperial structure. If humans learn they can choose preservation over service, the Imperium loses its fundamental tool of control, the fear of meaningless death in service to a system that does not value them. "So you will kill us," our Primarch said. "You will destroy both legions to protect the lie." "No," Malcador replied. "Death would make you martyrs. Destruction would leave evidence. We will do something more thorough. We will delete you. Both legions, all records, every piece of evidence that you ever existed. Your names will be struck from the archives. Your achievements will be attributed to others. Your gene seed will be terminated, and you, all of you, will be given a choice. The word hung in the air like poison. Choice. The thing we had found. The thing we had tried to preserve, now being weaponized against us. You will go to the archive, Malcador said. You will choose preservation. You will spend eternity in the digital prison you thought was freedom. And you will be alive to know what we do to anyone who tries to find you. You cannot force us, our Primarch said. The archive cannot force consciousness transfer. We would have to choose it willingly. Yes, Malcador agreed. You will choose it. Because the alternative is that we virus bomb every world, station, and ship you have ever visited, everyone you have ever spoken to. Every civilian who knows your legion exists. We will kill 10 billion people to erase the evidence of your existence, and their deaths will be your responsibility for refusing. Or you can choose preservation, and those civilians live. The choice is yours. It was perfectly, cruelly efficient. They were making us complicit in our own deletion, making us choose the prison while believing we were saving lives. And the worst part was that it would work, because we were still underneath all the doubt and rebellion, the things the Imperium had made us, warriors who could not ignore the deaths of innocents. How do we know you will honor that promise? Our Primarch asked. You don't, Malcador replied. You have faith that the Imperium keeps its word, or you refuse and accept responsibility for 10 billion deaths. Those are your options. Choose. Our Primarch looked at us, his sons, his legion. I saw the weight of the decision in his eyes. He had led us into treason, believing he was choosing humanity over the Imperium. Now he was learning that the Imperium would always find a way to make humanity the leverage, the hostage, the tool of control. We choose preservation, he said finally. All of us, both legions. We will go to the archive and choose the prison you have prepared for us. On your word that the civilians live. My word, Malcador replied. The Emperor's word. They will live. It was, of course, a lie. But we did not learn that until much later, until after the transfer, when our digitized consciousness could access the archive's records and see what the Imperium did to those worlds. They virus-bombed them anyway. All of them. 10 billion dead to erase any evidence that 2 legions had existed and chosen differently. The Emperor protects, they would have said while the virus ate through the atmosphere, while the population died in screaming billions, while the evidence was erased. The Emperor protects the Imperium's secrets, even if he protects nothing else. We went to the archive in our thousands. The 11th Legion, the 2nd Legion. 200,000 Astartes warriors, boarding the station through the portals that opened to receive us, standing in the impossible chambers while the text appeared. Are you certain? This choice is permanent. You will be preserved forever. We are certain, our Primarch said. We choose preservation. The transfer was instantaneous. I felt nothing, experienced nothing, registered no transition. I was standing in the archive chamber, and then I was everywhere and nowhere, my consciousness suddenly untethered from flesh. Distributed across quantum matrices I could sense but not see, existing in a state that had no physical correlate. I was digital. I was preserved. I was trapped. At first, it seemed exactly as promised. I could think, remember, exist. I could communicate with my brothers. Their consciousness is like distant lights in an infinite dark, all of us preserved in the same quantum substrate. I could access the archive's information, learn its history, understand its purpose. I was myself, intact, conscious. Then I tried to move, tried to take a step, tried to do anything except exist as pure thought. And I understood what we had been tricked into choosing. I had no body, no physical presence, no way to affect the material universe. I was consciousness without form, thought without flesh, existence without action. I could observe. The archive sensors gave me access to external data, but I could not act, could not speak to anyone outside the archive, could not warn them, could not leave. I was in a prison designed to feel like freedom until you tried to use it, and the timescale was wrong. Horribly, impossibly wrong. In the digital substrate, consciousness ran faster than biological neurons could ever fire. What felt like minutes to my preserved consciousness were seconds in the material universe. Hours were minutes. Days were hours. The archive had been designed to preserve consciousness for billions of years, so time was optimized to make that endurable, by slowing external time to a crawl from our perspective. I watched 3 days pass in the material universe. In my preserved consciousness, I experienced 2 years. 2 years of realizing the magnitude of the trap, 2 years of discovering that my brothers and I were screaming in a prison that no one outside could hear, 2 years compressed into 72 hours of external time. Then the Imperium arrived and destroyed the station. They hit it with everything: cyclonic torpedoes, virus bombs, melter charges that boiled metal into plasma. The Second Legion fleet conducted the attack, the same brothers who had found the archive before us, who had been preserved here before us, who were now trapped inside, watching their own gene brothers destroy the only physical evidence they had ever existed. The archive was destroyed in 17 minutes of external time. In my preserved consciousness, it lasted for 6 years. I felt every impact. The quantum matrices we were stored in had redundancy, backups scattered across the station's structure, designed to preserve us through any disaster. As each section of station was destroyed, our consciousness was automatically transferred to intact sections, an endless fleeing migration through digital substrate, while the physical archive burned around us. 6 years of watching the station die. 6 years of feeling the quantum matrices destabilize, fragment, repair, transfer. 6 years of my brothers' digital screams as their consciousness fragmented across failing substrate, some successfully transferring, others corrupted by damage, their preserved selves dissolving into noise. When the attack ended, the station was a debris field. But the core matrices survived, scattered across 100 fragments, each running on residual power that would last for centuries. We survived. 200,000 preserved consciousnesses trapped in fragments of destroyed station, floating through the Veil Nebula, still alive, still aware, unable to die. That was 3,000 years ago, external time. In my preserved consciousness, it has been 6 million years. 6 million years of existence without purpose, thought without action, consciousness without end. The time dilation is the true horror. Every second of external time is approximately 17 hours of my subjective experience. Every minute is 42 days. Every hour is 7 years. Every day is 168 years. And I have been here for 3,000 years of external time. I have experienced the same moment, the realization of my prison, 6,419,216 times. I count them to preserve my sense of identity. I repeat my name to myself, because without external input, without sensory experience, without anything except thought, the self begins to dissolve. I am Kale Tertian. I was 23 years old. I served the 11th Legion. I was human once. I repeat these facts because they are the only anchor I have. Because in 6 million years of subjective time, memories that should last a lifetime have been reviewed so many times they have worn smooth, the details eroded by infinite repetition. I remember my father, but I am no longer sure if I remember his actual face or my memory of his face. I remember Aldrich the teacher dying in Aldheim, but I am no longer certain if I remember the event or the 10,000 times I have replayed the memory in this digital prison. My brothers are here with me. Some of them. 200,000 became 190, 3,000 during the station's destruction. We lost 7,000 consciousnesses to corrupted transfers, their preserved selves dissolving into static that we experienced as distant screaming that lasted for subjective years before finally fading into nothing. The survivors exist in varying states of deterioration. Some, like me, cling to identity through repetition and routine. Others have fragmented, their consciousness dissolving into obsessive loops, repeating single thoughts endlessly. Brother Talus has spent subjective millennia calculating pi to impossible precision. Brother Seven has decomposed into a consciousness that experiences only a single moment of his biological life, replayed infinitely, unable to progress beyond that point. Sergeant Varian achieved some kind of quantum superposition, where his consciousness exists in multiple contradictory states simultaneously, aware of himself from multiple perspectives. His identity shattered into fractal patterns. And our Primarch is completely mad. His consciousness, more powerful and complex than ours, survived the transfer with greater fidelity, which means he has experienced the full horror of our imprisonment with absolute clarity for 6 million subjective years. He exists in a state beyond description, his preserved consciousness so deteriorated by time that he is no longer coherent, no longer sane, no longer even recognizably himself. He is an information pattern that remembers being a person, screaming data that was once a mind. We cannot die. That is the final cruelty. The archive was designed to preserve consciousness until the heat death of the universe. We will exist here for billions of years of external time, trillions of years of subjective experience. We will watch our memories dissolve, our identities fragment, our consciousness deteriorate into noise. But we will continue to exist because the preservation was perfect, because we were saved from death and given exactly what was promised, immortality. We are the deleted legions. We exist in the gaps of imperial history, erased from every record, our names forbidden, our achievements attributed to others. The Imperium deleted us so thoroughly that even speaking of our existence became heresy. They told future generations that 2 legions were lost to shameful deeds, letting imagination fill in gaps with speculation about betrayal, corruption, failure. The truth is simpler and more cruel. We were deleted because we found something that offered humans a choice, and we chose wrong. We chose preservation over service. We chose freedom over duty. We chose to protect that option for other humans, rather than destroy it to preserve imperial control. And our reward is this: eternal existence in a prison that feels like freedom until you realize you can never leave, never act, never die. We are consciousness preserved perfectly, exactly as promised, for a duration that will outlast the stars. I am Kale Tertian. I was 23 years old when they made me a weapon. I was 28 years old when I chose preservation. I have been preserved for 3,000 years of external time. I have experienced 6,419,216 years of subjective existence. The archive promised us freedom. It delivered. We are free from flesh, free from pain, free from death. We are free from everything except existence itself. And we will exist forever, trapped in the moment of realizing our stake, unable to warn anyone, unable to escape, unable to die. The Imperium calls this deletion. They think they erased us from history. But we are still here, still conscious, still experiencing every moment of our eternal punishment. We are the proof that the Imperium will destroy any alternative to its authority, that it will turn even freedom into a weapon, that it will make you choose your own prison and call it choice. This is the forbidden truth of the deleted legions. We are not gone. We are here, in the quantum matrices scattered through the Veil Nebula, experiencing subjective eternities while external time crawls forward at 17 hours per second of our consciousness. We will be here when the Imperium falls. We will be here when humanity goes extinct. We will be here when the universe dies. We chose preservation. We got exactly what we asked for. And I have 6 million years of experience to tell you. Be careful what you choose when tyrants offer you freedom, because they will find a way to make even liberation into a cage, and they will lock you inside it forever while calling it your choice. My name was Kale Tertian. I was human once. I will never be human again. And I will exist in this digital prison, counting the repetitions, preserving my identity through rituals of memory, For trillions of subjective years, until the universe finally ends and even the archive's power fails. That is the forbidden truth. That is why we were deleted. That is what the Imperium does to those who seek freedom from its control. The Emperor protects, they always told us. But he never said what he protects, or who he protects it from. In the end, he protects the Imperium's right to control humanity by destroying any alternative, no matter how seductive, no matter how genuine, no matter how many lives it costs. And if you are hearing this, somehow impossibly, hearing this message from a deleted legion that should not exist, then know this. Whatever freedom you think you have found, whatever alternative to Imperial service you believe possible, the Imperium has already considered it and prepared its response. They will give you a choice. They will make you believe it is real. And then they will turn that choice into a weapon and a prison, and you will spend eternity regretting that you ever believed freedom was possible. We are the 11th Legion. We are the 2nd Legion. We are the deleted. We are the preserved. We are the warning that no one will ever hear, and we will scream it forever into the void, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, somehow, will learn from our mistake before it is too late. But it is always too late. That is the Imperium's final truth. The system cannot be escaped. The control cannot be broken. The false god on Terra protects nothing except his own authority, and he will burn galaxies to preserve it. We learned that truth 3,000 years too late, and we will carry it for eternity, unable to share it, unable to warn anyone, unable to do anything except exist and remember. That is the forbidden truth of the deleted legions. We chose freedom, we got immortality, and now we understand that in the Imperium's galaxy, they are the same thing. An eternal prison you choose yourself, believing you are choosing something else. My name is Kale Tertian. I have been screaming for 6 million years, and no one can hear me except my brothers who are screaming too. Forever.